I'm not sure how to even begin, but I feel like I need to let this out somewhere, and maybe someone out there has gone through something similar. My wife, Sarah, and I have been together for 7 years. 7 solid, steady years, or so I thought. We had our ups and downs, as any couple does, but nothing that ever shook the foundation of our relationship. A stable life, decent jobs, a snug little house in Bloomington, and nothing too dramatic to speak of. Until last month. That is when everything shifted, and I cannot shake this gnawing feeling that something is wrong. It began about 3 weeks ago. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and realized Sarah was not beside me in bed. At first, I thought she might be in the bathroom or downstairs grabbing a drink. But when I got up to check, she was nowhere to be found upstairs. I padded downstairs, expecting to see her lounging on the couch or scrolling through her phone in the kitchen. Instead, I found her standing by the front door, coat still on, like she had just come inside. She looked startled, just for a second, but it was enough to notice. I asked her what was going on. She barely hesitated before replying. She said she had been called in for an emergency at work. Sarah is a high school counselor. An emergency at 2 o'clock in the morning? It did not make sense. I asked her what kind of emergency, and she launched into a story about a colleague needing help preparing materials for an urgent parent meeting. She even mentioned that the colleague was dealing with personal issues and needed her support. It was specific enough to shut me up, but it felt off. I went back to bed, but my mind was on overdrive. Teachers and counselors do not get summoned for emergencies in the dead of night. Even if a friend were in trouble, who would call for help with work stuff at that hour? The logic did not add up. The next morning, I tried to push the unease aside. Sarah has always been someone who goes above and beyond for people. Maybe she really was just being a good friend. But once the doubt crept in, it refused to leave. It began coloring how I saw everything. I started noticing odd things. Sarah seemed more withdrawn, glued to her phone more than usual. I would catch her grinning at text messages she never shared with me, or she would disappear into the bathroom with her phone for unusually long stretches. That was new. She had always been open with her phone before, leaving it on the counter or handing it over if she needed help with something. And then there was her sudden change in appearance. Sarah has always had great style, but now she was dressing to the nines for casual errands. High heels for a quick grocery run, a bold red lip for a trip to the post office. At first, I thought she might just be treating herself, but when paired with everything else, it felt like part of a pattern. I hate to admit it, but my paranoia got the better of me. One morning, while she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. That is when I noticed she had added a lock screen password. She had never done that before. Later, I asked her casually about it, and she said a student had grabbed her phone in class, so she was being cautious. It sounded plausible, but I was not convinced. There is another piece to this. For the past month, I have been feeling utterly drained. This bone-deep exhaustion hits me like clockwork every evening around 7 p.m. It is not the kind of tired you can shake off with a nap. It feels heavier, different. At first, I thought it might be stress. My job in tech support can get intense, and the long hours are no joke. But this exhaustion felt out of proportion. I started wondering if it had to do with my workouts. Sarah and I joined this new gym a few months ago, and she encouraged me to sign up with a trainer named Brad. He is one of those super fit guys who seems to have endless energy. He introduced me to these protein shakes he swore by, saying they were perfect for recovery. They worked like a charm at first, but lately I have been feeling worse, not better. I mentioned to Sarah that I wanted to see a doctor about it, and her reaction surprised me. She brushed it off, saying it was probably seasonal fatigue or that I was pushing myself too hard at the gym. She even suggested I take a break from working out, a complete 180 from her usual enthusiasm for fitness. It felt odd. Why would she not want me to figure out what was going on? All of this has me spiraling. I do not want to accuse her of anything without proof. What if I am overthinking everything? But every time I catch her texting someone she will not name, or see her dressing up to leave the house late at night, that sinking feeling in my gut deepens. Am I losing it? Overreacting? I just needed to get this off my chest. If anyone has been in a similar situation, I would love to hear how you handled it. Right now, I feel like I am standing on shaky ground, unsure of what is real anymore. A few days later, I finally made it to the doctor. I could not keep brushing off the relentless fatigue that had been dragging me down for weeks. When I sat in that sterile office, I laid it all out. The exhaustion that felt unnatural, how it had crept up so suddenly, and how it was affecting everything in my life. I even admitted I was scared it could be something serious, a deficiency, or worse, some hidden condition I had no idea about. What I did not tell the doctor was that I had not informed Sarah about the visit. Her reaction the last time I brought it up was still fresh in my mind. She had waved it off like it was nothing, like my concerns were overblown. I was not in the mood to have that conversation again, especially when I had no answers yet. The doctor was thorough, running a battery of tests, blood work, hormone levels, and anything else he thought might provide clues. As I left the clinic, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I was finally taking a step toward answers, but I could not shake the fear of what those answers might be. A few days later, the results came in, and they were unsettling. My blood tests revealed unusually high levels of benzodiazepines, a type of sedative typically used for anxiety or sleep disorders. The doctor's face was a mix of concern and confusion as he asked if I had been prescribed them or might have taken them accidentally. I told him no, absolutely not. I had never been prescribed anything like that, and I was not someone who took random pills. The realization hit me hard. Someone had to be giving me these drugs without my knowledge. That is when the pieces started to fall into place, and the puzzle turned horrifying. The exhaustion. The way it hit harder after I started drinking those protein shakes Brad had been pushing on me at the gym. He was my trainer, someone I had trusted. But now, I could not shake the suspicion that something was terribly wrong. Could the answer really be that simple? Was I being drugged through what I thought was just a recovery supplement? I needed confirmation. I was not about to hurl accusations without evidence. So, I decided to take one of the protein powder tubs Brad had given me to a private lab for testing. It was not easy. I had to go through a lawyer to ensure everything was handled legally, but at that point, I was willing to do whatever it took to get the truth. When the results came back, they confirmed my worst fears. The protein powder was spiked with sedatives. I cannot describe the rush of emotions that hit me. Anger, disgust, fear. But above all, betrayal. It was not just about being drugged, it was the question of why. Why would Brad, a guy I barely knew outside the gym, go to such lengths? What could he possibly gain from this? And then it hit me. What if he was not acting alone? That thought cracked everything wide open. I started replaying Sarah's insistence that I sign up with Brad in the first place. I had been fine with my own routine, but she had practically pushed me into personal training with him. I thought about how distant and secretive she had been lately. The late-night outings, the sudden password on her phone, all of it started forming a picture I did not want to see. But here's the thing, I was not sure. Not completely. My heart refused to believe Sarah could be involved. The woman I had loved for 7 years, who had been my rock, she could not be part of something so sinister. Could she? I decided to play along. I stopped drinking the shakes entirely, but pretended nothing had changed. When I came home from the gym, I acted just as tired as ever. I faked exhaustion, kept up the same routines, and went to bed early. I wanted to lull Sarah and Brad, if he was involved, into a false sense of security while I worked quietly to uncover the truth. In the meantime, I started paying closer attention to Sarah's behavior. Patterns began to emerge, undeniable and chilling. Almost every other night, she would leave the house after dinner, dressed to impress. Her excuses were always vague. Meeting a friend, running errands, attending a school meeting I had never heard about. But now that my mind was clearer, the inconsistencies stood out. One night, she said she was grocery shopping, but the fridge was just as empty the next day. Another time, she claimed to be at a late-night yoga class. Yoga studios do not run classes at 11 o'clock at night. I knew I needed more than just gut feelings. I started keeping a log. Every outing, every excuse, I wrote it all down. Whenever I caught glimpses of her phone screen, I tried to memorize call logs or text previews. The paranoia was eating at me, but I was determined to find the truth. Eventually, I realized I could not do this alone. I hired a private investigator. It was expensive, but by that point, I did not care. I needed professional help to get to the bottom of this. Now, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something that is going to shatter my life. There is a part of me that does not even want to know what the investigator will find. Once I know, there is no going back. But the other part of me, the part that has been lied to and manipulated, needs to see this through. I deserve to know the truth, no matter how much it hurts. The evening started as usual. Sarah made dinner, simple stuff, spaghetti with some salad on the side. We sat across from each other at the dining table, exchanging the kind of small talk that had once felt comforting. She asked about my day, nodding in that automatic way, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. I told her about some dull issue at work, and when I asked about her day, she mentioned school meetings and paperwork. Everything seemed normal, but her refusal to hold my gaze for too long set off alarms in my mind. By 9 p.m., she got up, smoothing down her shirt, and casually said she was heading out to grab coffee with a coworker. Her tone was light, unbothered, as if it were the most mundane thing in the world. I nodded, pretending to focus on a work email on my laptop, but inside, my stomach churned. Something about her manner, too calm, too rehearsed, made my pulse race. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I snapped my laptop shut, grabbed my jacket, and called a cab. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Sitting in the back of the car, I kept thinking, am I making a mistake? What if she really is meeting a coworker? What if this is all in my head? But deep down, the truth already gnawed at me. I just wasn't ready to face it. I instructed the cab driver to stay a few cars behind hers, my heart pounding with every turn. We trailed her through familiar streets until she turned into a neighborhood I didn't recognize. She slowed down, finally pulling into the driveway of a modest, tidy house with a well-manicured lawn. I asked the driver to stop a few houses down, and I stayed in the cab, my breath shallow. The street was silent, save for the occasional chirp of crickets and the distant hum of a car engine. My chest felt tight as I watched Sarah step out of her car, smoothing her skirt. She looked stunning, as though she had gone the extra mile to perfect her appearance. My gut twisted. She glanced around quickly, too quickly, before walking up to the front door. I held my breath. She knocked, and a moment later, the door opened. It was Brad. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything else blurred as my focus locked on the two of them. Brad said something, his expression casual, and Sarah laughed, a light, carefree laugh that hit me like a punch to the gut. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her, shutting me out of their world. I sat there in the cab, staring at the house. Minutes passed, maybe hours, I couldn't tell. My mind raced, sifting through memories like a broken slideshow. Our wedding day, lazy Sunday mornings, quiet evenings spent watching TV. Every cherished moment felt tainted now, like it had all been part of some elaborate facade. Finally, I told the driver to take me home. Confronting her then and there crossed my mind, but I knew it would have been a mistake. My anger was too raw, my thoughts too jumbled. I needed to be strategic, not impulsive. Giving her a chance to twist the situation was out of the question. When Sarah came home a little after midnight, she looked almost serene. Her face glowed as if she had spent the evening in pure bliss. She kicked off her heels, smiled at me like nothing had happened, and said, "Hey, didn't think you'd still be up." I forced a smile, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She kissed my cheek, her lips chilled by the night air, and headed to the bathroom. I stayed on the couch, staring blankly at the floor. My thoughts were a chaotic mix of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could she do this? How long had it been going on? And worst of all, did she even care? In the days that followed, I felt like I was living a double life. Outwardly, I played the part of the oblivious husband, going through the motions of our routine. But inside, I was piecing together the reality she had been hiding from me. Every smile she gave me, every casual touch, felt like a cruel mockery. The private investigator I had hired delivered the confirmation I dreaded. Photos arrived, each one more damning than the last. Sarah and Brad meeting at the gym, the two of them sneaking off during the day. And the nail in the coffin, a shot of them entering a hotel together. My stomach churned as I stared at the images, the proof staring back at me. There was no denying it anymore. But the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the questions that haunted me late at night. Was I not enough? Had I failed her somehow? Could I have prevented this? These thoughts gnawed at me until I felt like I was unraveling. Deep down, though, I knew the truth. This wasn't about me. Sarah made a choice, a deliberate, selfish choice, and no amount of self-blame could change that. Seeking help was the smartest move I made. Therapy became a lifeline, helping me untangle the storm of emotions I felt. Anger, sadness, confusion. It all started to make sense under the guidance of someone who could see the situation clearly. The therapist reminded me that it was okay to grieve, not just for the betrayal, but for the life I thought I had, for the woman I thought Sarah was. Meanwhile, I began preparing for the inevitable confrontation. I compiled everything. The investigator's photos, the timeline of her suspicious outings, the lab results from the drug protein powder. My lawyer was on standby, ready to help me navigate the fallout. Sarah doesn't know yet. She acts like everything is normal, completely unaware that I've unraveled her web of lies. Keeping this secret is exhausting, but it gives me a strange sense of power in a situation where I've felt so powerless. When the time comes to confront her, I'll be ready. For now, I wait. I don't know what the future holds, but one thing is clear. I won't let her deceit define me. This is the beginning of a new chapter, one where I take back control of my life. After trailing Sarah that night and witnessing the undeniable proof of her affair with Brad, I realized I couldn't keep living a double life. Every passing day, every forced smile and awkward small talk at the dinner table felt like a knife twisting deeper. Pretending was no longer an option. I needed to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt, and take steps to end our marriage. The first thing I did was arrange another meeting with my lawyer. This time, I laid everything bare. The tainted protein powder, the medical reports showing sedatives in my system, the investigator's findings, and the damning photos of Sarah and Brad together. My lawyer, a no-nonsense man named Michael, didn't mince words. He went through the evidence methodically, explaining what would be most useful in court and how I could protect myself moving forward. But Michael also gave me advice I wasn't expecting. Stay calm. Do not make any rash decisions. Easier said than done. Every cell in my body screamed for confrontation. I wanted to hurl accusations at Sarah, to march into the gym and demand answers from Brad. But Michael was right. Acting out of anger could jeopardize my position. I had to be smart, strategic. From that moment on, I approached everything with cold calculation. The first step was securing my finances. Sarah and I shared a joint account, so I quietly opened a separate one in my name. I didn't drain the joint account. That would have been too obvious. But I began transferring small amounts of my paycheck into the new account, enough to ensure I had a safety net if things got ugly. Next, I gathered every important document I could find: house deeds, car titles, insurance policies, tax returns. It felt surreal, like preparing for a war I never wanted to fight. But deep down, I knew it was necessary. Emotionally, though, it was a living hell. The facade of normalcy was suffocating. I noticed things that cut deeper than ever. The way she smiled at her phone, the way her voice softened when she whispered into it late at night. Her perfume was different now, bolder, more daring. I couldn't help but wonder if it was a scent Brad had complimented her on. And yet, Sarah carried on like nothing was wrong. One night, as we watched television, she leaned her head on my shoulder. It was a tender, familiar gesture, but I felt nothing. Sitting there, pretending to be the husband she thought I still was, I realized how far apart we had drifted. The betrayal had built an uncrossable chasm between us. I thought about confronting her 100 times. I played out scenarios in my head, some dramatic, others calm, but I always stopped short. If I lashed out now, I'd be giving her control. I wasn't ready to hand her the reins. Instead, I continued collecting evidence. One evening, I pretended to fall asleep early, leaving my phone recording in the living room. Sure enough, about an hour later, she was on the phone with Brad. Her laugh was light, carefree. She spoke in hushed tones about meeting him again soon. Hearing her so happy, so free, while I was upstairs trying to hold myself together was a kind of pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. A week later, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Sarah had gone out to meet some friends. I decided to take one last look through her things. I wasn't proud of it, but at that point, I needed closure. Buried in her purse, I found a receipt for a hotel room. The date lined up with one of the nights she claimed to be at a school workshop. That was it, the final blow. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sadness. Just an empty, hollow sense of resignation. The next morning, I called Michael and told him I was ready to move forward with the divorce. He helped me draft a letter to Sarah, a straightforward explanation that I knew about the affair and that I wanted out. I didn't want to ambush her, so I waited until she came home from work. When she walked through the door that evening, I asked her to sit down. My voice was steady, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone cautious. I slid the letter across the table. "Read it." Her expression shifted as she read, confusion giving way to shock, then fear. When she looked up at me, her face was pale. Ryan, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I said, cutting her off. My voice surprised me with how calm it sounded. "I know about you and Brad. The meetups, the hotel, everything. And I know about the protein powder." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I continued. "I'm filing for divorce. You'll hear from him soon." The tears started then, big, dramatic sobs that felt more rehearsed than genuine. She begged me to talk, to let her explain, but I wasn't interested. Whatever excuses she had didn't matter. The damage was done. That night, I moved into the guest room. Sarah's attempts to act apologetic felt hollow. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of the lies she'd told and the life she'd shattered. Now we're in the middle of finalizing the divorce. Therapy has been my lifeline through all of this. My therapist has helped me process the anger, the sadness, and the lingering guilt. He's reminded me that it's okay to grieve, for the marriage I thought I had, for the woman I believed Sarah was, and for the future I'd imagined for us. It's not easy, but every day, the pain feels a little less sharp. I'm starting to rebuild, one piece at a time. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm reclaiming my life and my peace. It has been a few weeks since the truth unraveled, and though the dust hasn't fully settled, I feel like I can finally breathe. Each day feels like a small step forward, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I see glimpses of hope. The divorce process is officially underway, and I've moved out of the house. I found a modest apartment on the other side of the city, not far from my office, but far enough to feel like a fresh start. Packing up my life was harder than I anticipated. Every object, from coffee mugs to photo frames, carried the weight of memories. Some were warm and happy, but now even those felt like echoes of something irreparably broken. Leaving the home Sarah and I had built together wasn't easy. That house had been our sanctuary, a place where so many chapters of our life unfolded. Hosting our first holiday dinner, lazy weekends spent in our pajamas, quiet nights talking about dreams we'd never lived to see. All of it now felt like a cruel reminder of what was lost. Staying there would have been unbearable. Sarah has been unpredictable since everything came to light. One day, she floods my phone with emotional texts, begging for forgiveness and promising she still loves me. She calls her actions a mistake and claims we can fix things. The next day, she shifts, accusing me of blowing things out of proportion and insisting Brad meant nothing, as if that could somehow soften the blow. I've stopped responding entirely. My lawyer advised me to direct all communication through him, and honestly, it's been a relief. Freeing myself from the back and forth has been one of the healthiest decisions I've made. Her excuses, her shifting narratives, her attempts to rewrite what happened. I don't need any of it. I won't pretend I've found closure. The betrayal still lingers in my mind, surfacing at random moments. Sometimes I catch myself replaying events, wondering how I missed the signs or whether I could have done something differently. Could I have salvaged our marriage if I had acted sooner? Was there a moment when everything could have turned out differently? But here's the hard truth I've come to accept. Sarah's choices weren't about me. They were hers alone, shaped by her own selfishness and dishonesty. Nothing I did or didn't do gave her permission to lie, cheat, or betray me. That realization has been painful, but it's also freeing. As for Brad, he barely registers in my mind anymore. From what I've heard through mutual acquaintances, their so-called relationship has already fizzled out. Apparently, sneaking around and stolen moments lose their appeal when reality sets in. I'd be lying if I said hearing that didn't bring a faint sense of vindication, but mostly I feel indifferent. They're not my problem anymore. What matters to me now is rebuilding my life. Therapy has been a cornerstone of that process. My therapist has been invaluable, helping me navigate the roller coaster of emotions, anger, sadness, guilt, and confusion. He's reminded me that healing is not a straight path. Some days are better than others, and that's okay. The important thing is to keep moving forward, no matter how slow progress might feel. I've also reconnected with old friends, something I hadn't realized I'd neglected during my marriage. For years, I let my world shrink, focusing solely on Sarah and our life together. It's only now that I see how much I isolated myself without meaning to. My friends have been incredible, showing up in ways I didn't even know I needed. Whether it's grabbing dinner, going for a hike, or simply sitting and letting me vent, they've reminded me that I'm not alone. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is to trust my instincts. Looking back, the signs were there all along, but I dismissed them. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being insecure or paranoid. Now I know better. Blind trust isn't the same as healthy trust. And when your gut tells you something is off, it's okay to listen. If my experience could offer any advice to someone else, it would be this. Trust your gut. Changes in behavior might not always mean something sinister, but they're worth paying attention to. Don't ignore the feeling that something isn't right. Keep evidence. It might feel sneaky, but documenting what's happening can protect you in ways you won't understand until later. Prioritize your mental health. Betrayal takes a toll on every part of you. Therapy isn't a sign of weakness. It's a way to reclaim your strength. Lean on your support system, friends, family, a therapist, whoever you trust. You don't have to go through this alone. Know your worth. Their betrayal is a reflection of their choices, not yours. You deserve honesty, respect, and love. As for me, I'm taking it day by day. I've started running again, a habit I abandoned during the chaos. The early morning air feels cleansing, like I'm leaving behind more than just footsteps. I've also been thinking about picking up a new hobby, maybe learning to cook or taking a pottery class. For the first time in years, I'm focusing on what I want, and it feels like reclaiming something I didn't even know I'd lost. Will I trust someone again? Honestly, I don't know. The idea of opening my heart feels terrifying. But I refuse to let Sarah's actions define my future. Life's too short to carry bitterness. Writing all this out has been a kind of therapy in itself. Betrayal is shattering, but it doesn't have to break you. I may have lost a marriage, but I'm rediscovering myself. And that's a victory I'm proud to claim.